Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And me, Robbie.
And this week we will be returning to our Divisive Films feature with Robert Eggers The Lighthouse from 2019.
So if you listen to the first Divisive Films feature that we did, we looked at Ari Aster's Midsummer. We kind of took a bit of a deep dive into it, spoke a little bit about the production, spoke about what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, and kind of why it was such a divisive film. I don't know if you find this, Seb, but a lot of these kind of divisive films do seem to be these, for the most part, do seem to be these A24 productions, don't they?
They do, yeah. A lot of the A24 films are obviously... They are slightly defying some expectation between what is and what isn't, maybe in terms of horror. So I'd say this one, although this is not as divisive a film as Midsummer.
Yeah, definitely.
From a viewing point, but also from if you look, there is a fair amount of audience out there that did just enjoy it, and there's a fair amount of critics that also did enjoy it. There's not as much with Midsummer, where there just seemed to be a complete split.
Yeah.
But this is one where it's divisive in terms of that the horror fans expecting to see their standard horror where maybe that monster's going to come at some point or something like that's going to happen. For those fans, there's still a fair amount out there that were like, they told me this was a horror film, and this is not a horror film.
Yeah.
And I would say more so than with Midsummer that this is much more of a case where I was myself questioning, is this a horror film? Like, is it a horror film? It's suspenseful and tense, and it's a slow build, and it does have some kind of imagery like that is like haunting a little bit.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say this ever goes into like a terrifying, creepy. Like, it didn't get into my head quite as much. I do really like the film, but it was one of those where I was thinking I would put this. This is one where we were talking the other day. But it's hard because horror does get pigeonholed, and this is why it's divisive, because for those people that pigeonhole it into just a slasher or just a supernatural, but a supernatural where it has to go bang and boom and you see the monster.
Yeah.
This is where horror kind of becomes a bit of an annoying, like, some people do try to box it in.
Yeah, and I think
I would say that this has got horror elements in a way. It's not a full-on horror. You wouldn't classify that. I don't think Robert Eggers classifies this as a full-on horror.
No, I think it very much reminded me, just kind of off my initial impressions of it, it very much reminded me of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Yeah,
it was horror in that kind of aspect. You know, it's not particularly loads of jump scares. It's not particularly, gruesome for the most part. It's very much about the characters and it's about the themes of the isolation and it's that kind of
I felt that there were several scenes in this film where I felt I could feel that Shining, like that Shining influence. I think feels like it was there. There were a couple of shots that I was like, that's very Shining kind of isolation.
Yeah.
Obviously, so it is that kind of, it's that slow build horror that has that kind of isolation element, just like kind of The Shining. The Shining definitely is the most I could kind of classify it in. And with the A24 thing, it's a case of they're very much a company that is. So this is when you kind of go into my kind of film studies kind of way of like, this is like French New Wave. A24 is like that. Like where Income's French New Wave was like, it was a bunch of directors given free rein to do what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
No one's getting in their way. No one's saying, oh, this isn't going to be right for the commercial element. This isn't going to be right for that. It was directors, auteurs who had their own vision and got to do what they wanted to do. And I think A24 is pretty much, as a company, is letting directors do that. It's letting them do what they want. Yeah,
I think that's one positive thing to say about A24 is they don't seem to look so much at the commercial aspect. It doesn't look as if they're not something similar to Blumhouse or something like that, where they're looking to almost establish franchises. They're not Lionsgate or something like that. So, obviously, a lot of these are relatively lower budget. So the budget for The Lighthouse was around 11 million, and the box office was kind of around 18 million. And it seems to me as if A24 are more focused about releasing standalone films, not so much concerned about the box office. I mean,
No
if there was a
franchise.
massive flop, I wonder whether they would be curious to continue to
Yeah.
work with somebody. But they seem to be more looking at isolated films, and like you said, allowing these directors to have their own say and not so much studio interference when you're trying to think of, making profits and building franchises. So the one thing I do really like about A24 is that, I mean, sometimes I find the films are hit and miss.
Yeah.
But
it's better. This is what I mean, though. It's very much that. So, like my comparison was kind of with that French New Wave was purely because it was a case of, and out of that we got some masterpiece of film that we were kind of French New Wave. But as a standard viewer, if you watch a lot of them, they're just ones that have pointless tangents and random scenes just half the time to be different and trying to be obscure. At A24, some of the films also have that, where they're trying to be different, they're trying to be obscure, and sometimes they don't quite always work. And that's what you get when you let a filmmaker have free roam.
Yeah.
They're either really good at it, or they have some good elements, but they just don't work completely. And I think that's like, but I wouldn't necessarily compare it to this, The Lighthouse. And as you said about the box office, I mean, to be honest, 18 million on 11 million budget isn't actually very. If anything, that's not making money.
It's not making money.
The film's not making, like, there's a, we've talked about the threefold where nearly. Now, I would assume A24 does not spend that much on marketing.
Yeah, I would assume.
Probably less. So that threefold, like, money thing that I mentioned before, where it's like the budget times by 3 would normally be where you're making profit.
Yeah.
That wouldn't necessarily apply to a film where you're not doing as much, because sometimes on a lot of films, they'll spend as much on marketing as they will on the film itself.
Yeah, definitely.
A24, I would not believe do that at all.
Star Wars and MCU films definitely do.
Well, they do that all the time. And so do quite a lot of
them.
ones, I mean, like Halloween Kills coming out soon. You've seen a lot of promotional for that because it made a lot of money. The first one, yes, they're gonna push it more.
Yeah.
But these films, not so much. So I think, I'd imagine that it pretty much just kind of did about what they expected. Maybe wanted a bit more, but there are certain elements of this of why people might have been a bit. I think Robert Pattinson would have been part of that. Like,
really?
He was at a point when he'd done a lot of indie films, but he wasn't, like, people didn't buy. Still, this film kind of has helped cement him. This and him getting in the Christopher Nolan Tenet film.
Yeah, well,
it's kind of cemented him more as. And this was the film that was released before he was announced as the new Batman or anything like
definitely.
this. And they said that and there was a lot of response to this is why he was like cast. Is that because they saw how like his performance in this film and were like, he could probably do this. And in some of his recent indie films, he's gone right under the radar for the last few years. But the general public don't really necessarily see him as still not yet.
Anyway. I think Twilight was kind of that albatross around his neck, wasn't it?
It was,
to kind of use a nautical saying for a nautical episode. Because obviously, I think Twilight is where 90% of the people know or knew him from, kind of found him. And that was, I mean, Twilight itself was a massively divisive series, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's they're fine for the fan base, basically. It was a fan base film franchise, but it made them a lot of money, to be fair.
That's it. That's all you need.
It made a ton of money. So I think, there are some elements, and as you can say, like, unlike, say, Midsummer, and the divisive nature, I think, again, coming back to that, is the divisive nature with Hereditary and Midsummer. I would say that the trailers and publicity for those films didn't necessarily sell them as the film that they were.
Yeah.
And that creates its own divisive nature. Because Hereditary especially, I remember watching the trailer for that and thinking, I don't know, like, I'm not really interested by this. I'm not interested by the supernatural nature of it. I've said I think it's a good film, but it's not amazing as people sell it to me, I don't think. But I also remember watching the trailer and being like, I've got no interest in watching that because it just looks like your standard schlocky supernatural. Like, it's got a good cast, but it doesn't look anything great.
I don't remember the trailer for. I remember the trailer for Midsummer, and I actually remember wanting to kind of see it. But the one thing I remember in the trailer for Midsummer that the Oracle or whatever it was
was in it.
Was very heavily featured
Yeah.
and rarely featured in the film, and it kind of got me thinking. Then I don't know if this is just my interpretation of it, but Ari Aster, he had the girl in the first one. I can't remember the actress's name. The one who did all the clicking noises.
Oh yeah.
And she, she's got some kind of physical condition, and then you had the Oracle, which has some kind of physical condition as well. And it kind of made me feel like it's Ari Aster just using these people to kind of
sell that as a thing, and then that Oracle's barely in it features at all. Like it's just a quick shot. But again, that's selling into the standard horror tropes of like Hereditary was so much more of that kind of creepy ghost from out of nowhere kind of thing. The second one was more of that kind of, yes, a bit Wicker Man, but also a bit like there's a monster here to come and get you kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is not what the film was at all. Lighthouse, there was pretty much no way to sell it any other way. So the people that weren't going to be interested in that kind of different slow build film were never going to go and see this.
No.
This is a artsy, it's for that art audience. And I'd like to think some people have gone out of their way to be like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy this, but I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what people should do if you haven't seen this film. Because it's definitely worth it, but you need to be ready to kind of get into it.
Yeah.
You've got to give that first like half an hour or so some time to build it in for you.
For me, I loved it from the opening shot. It's so weird. This because I know we had a little chat before we pressed play. But this film, like The Light in the Lighthouse, it did really fucking draw me in. I mean, straight from the opening, we had the you kind of get the opening credits, which are very bleak and it's very minimalist in itself.
Yeah.
And you get the blaring of the siren. And I was thinking, okay, I'm kind of into this.
Yeah, I liked the blaring of the siren. So there's a fairly fit. So I only watched this last night. Well, no, I didn't. I watched this morning because last night I was going to watch it. I was going to watch it, and I watched it at the middle of the night. And I was like, I'm going to go to bed, and I'm going to watch this. And I don't think I've ever fallen asleep so quickly. And this isn't because of the film. I don't know why. I just suddenly,
you are.
By the time I'd kind of sorted it, I was like, oh yeah, I've not been feeling well this week. So by the time I started playing it, all I got was that, because it kind of fades into light. It takes a minute or so to fade into that light, and then you get the siren sound in the background. And I basically went to sleep, and like the siren sound, it was like, I remember hearing that. And then I swear to God, all throughout the night, I swear I was hearing a siren sound in my head, because I literally kept going, what the fuck is that noise? And then when I played the film again, I was like, that's the noise.
I
was hearing it. It got in my head all night long. Yeah. This siren sound was playing. It might have been because the film just kept, maybe I didn't pause it. Maybe the film kept playing in the
probably
background.
Did.
But I just got William Dafoe just screeching in my ear.
Yeah.
But yeah, that really did, like the siren sound and that score really kind of creates that kind of isolate.
It
like,
did.
Not the isolation, but uneasiness straight away. Because you were like, this kind of gets into my head after a couple of minutes. What would it be like if I'm hearing that literally like thousands of times a day, all day long, in a place where I've got no escape?
Exactly. And then I think there was I get this is one of the divisive things straight off the front is. So Robert Eggers is a very kind of he's massively into a lot of the old school horrors, isn't he? And for me, this felt there was a lot of shots in this that reminded me of kind of 30s, 40s Universal stuff, the kind of golden age of Hollywood as well. So the opening shot, where you see the helm, is it the front of the boat?
Yeah,
I'm trying to be nautical. You see that, and it's kind of. You see it kind of going through the water. That reminded me of a really old shot I've seen in films. And you could tell that, like, production-wise, when they would have been filming it in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it would have just been in, like, a swimming pool or something, and they'd be over it. But that just kind of struck me really well. And the fact that it's in, it's nearly square in a 1.19 to 1 aspect ratio. I thought I'd mess that up. Kind of threw me off a little bit because I heard that it was a black and white film, and I think that is another divisive thing, is that people hear about Robert Eggers and they think after The Witch, they think, okay, like
Yeah.
What's
I mean,
going for?
that's another little thing for especially if we're talking general audience. Black and white films, some people just won't, I won't watch it if it's black and white.
Yeah.
Same way people won't, I won't watch it if it's subtitled.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. They won't give it a chance, and that is a common general like audience. I know quite a few people who are like, I don't like black and white films. It's like, why don't you like black and white films?
Yeah.
Because it's a black and white film. But it's like, okay, yeah, but why don't you like the film?
Yeah.
Like if I showed you like Forrest Gump in black and white, so you're saying it definitely would be a terrible film because suddenly I've changed the color of the film. I'm not saying it would work for that film, but
That'd be weird.
you know what I mean? Like I was about to say The Dark Knight, but I was like, you wouldn't be able to see fuck off.
You wouldn't see anything
in black and white. Who's that?
Yeah, but it wasn't
yeah.
only. It's not only that which is, I think, brings up some of the divisiveness, but it's also that it's shot like a old style film. So
it is, yeah.
a lot of the shots we get are still shots, and we don't get many.
When we first see Pattinson and Dafoe from the front,
yeah,
it's that it's straight away. This is what made me think of my old like new wave cinema like thing, because that has loads of those static shots where it stays still for a moment and it lingers on the shot for a moment. And it just has them both there. It's like Robert Pattinson's like moustaches twitching, and for a moment Defoe's completely I mean, he could be like statue, like he's still Defoe, and then suddenly it does, just before it cuts away, he finally kind of does a bit of a move and then looks over towards the thing. That's it.
And he's got his pipe.
He's got the pipe that he's kind of moving around, but it's just like that. It's like here's our characters. These are our main characters. We don't need to have a moment of them explaining or telling you who we are.
But it's not just that. It's the fact that when they get to the island, they swap over with these two other lighthouse keepers, and we don't get any dialogue with them. We don't find out anything about them, and we don't get any dialogue for a little bit, do we?
No, we don't get any dialogue.
5-10 minutes.
Like even the people that are coming off, if you look at them, they don't necessarily look any different than people going on. Like it's almost like. And could be the same people crossing.
And there were some other shots that really were very old school for me. So there was one shot where Robert Pattinson is doing the roofs. I'm just going to call them by their names. Robert Pattinson is.
There was a bit of a confusion there with me, where I got confused by the names of the characters and all that kind of thing. Like in my notes, it's literally like, who the hell am I talking about?
Yeah. And he's going up onto the roof, and it's a very low shot. And it was one that was very Night of the Living Dead that Romero used to use a lot, which obviously he would have got from the Golden Age and from films before that.
Yeah,
but it was also one that Tobe Hooper used a lot in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to kind of, I don't know what it is about it, but just creates such a sense of dread. And when I was watching him climb this ladder, and it was just this low shot that wasn't moving, wasn't following him up or anything. It was really creepy. And there were other moments like when Dafoe is in the lighthouse and he's watching Pattinson from afar.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if that had been a film, you would have seen a close up of Dafoe's character when he was on the lighthouse to show his reaction or to show what he's looking at. But the fact that you didn't get any of that, you just saw him in the background standing there and watching. It creates this sense of like menace, which I don't think. We kind of, which is kind of lost in translation, I think, as time's gone on. We forgot about that kind of shot,
Yeah, no, I definitely got that, and I got this definitely from this and how it was going. But at that point, I kind of got this kind of that, not just Defoe's character, but everything's kind of looming over Robert Pattinson's.
Yeah,
like everything, he's below everything, like everyone else. He's never that peak, that top, that kind of thing. And that's more. I'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, I mean, because the basic plot of the film is that these it's set in 1890s, which I didn't clock on when I first watched it. I got that it was kind of back in the day,
back in
the day. But it was only when I watched it again, and then when I went over it and I kind of Wikipedia'd it and researched it a little bit, then I saw it was 1890s New England, and Ephraim Winslow, which is Robert Pattinson's character, badass name, kind of gets a contract job as a wickie, a lighthouse keeper for a month, under the supervision of Willem Dafoe's character Thomas Wake. And then it's you just I'm trying to describe it, but it's so strange, isn't it? Like we get there's elements that
It is basically like this is the thing, and I know even Robert Eggers said there's a lack of much plot at all, and that's purposeful. But there isn't really a major plot because it basically is almost the same set of scenes repeating again and again and again. They are literally Robert Pattinson's character is going about his job as the lowly, the lower down above his duties, while William Dafoe's guards the light tower and is in the lighthouse tower or watching over him, as we've noticed, kind of thing. And he is the only one that gets to go up there.
Yeah.
Pattinson's character does not get to go above. No. He never gets to go up to the lighthouse. And he is told that he must do his duties. It's not his place to be that man in there.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the scene is pretty much it's Pattinson's character on a repeat almost does his jobs. In the evening, they have meals
and drink
and things like that. They have a moment in thing. Maybe they have a wank.
Yeah, there's a lot of whacking off in this film.
There's a lot of whacking off
and farting as well.
Yeah, Defoe's definitely farting all the time, but it's kind of it's very similar idea of the fit, and that's to create that kind of their life. There's nothing else for them to do.
But it's repetition
and repetition, and that's what creates that kind of isolation for them, isn't it? That they are just repeating day and again. They're drinking. They're doing this, and this is just going to keep playing and playing and playing, kind of thing, over and over again, like some kind of horrible purgatory.
It's kind of that vibe, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
that's why it's kind of hard to describe that. There is obviously lots of events that kind of happen, and I think key parts like that we'll discuss a kind of thing. But it is a lot of it's hard to describe certain scenes when it's just a scene of people just sat there, or sat doing something, or Robert Pattinson going out by the sea to drop off layers of shit, throw out shit and things like that, which is one scene that definitely puts to my head. That was one of those. What the hell? Why the hell did you walk? He walks all the way out to the sea to throw these ladles of shit basically out, and it's you're throwing them against high winds. What do you think's going to happen? Of course, the shit's going to come back at you. And he screams because he's done it, and it's why did you go that far away to get rid of your shit?
I don't know. We don't want it on the island, maybe. Then you have a pile of shit.
Well, I guess so. But come on, we're not shitting shitting that much that you can't just hide a little pile somewhere.
But it's the strangeness of the first scene that we get when they have the meal, and Defoe's character does that toast, and he tries to get Ephraim to drink along with him, and he's not having it. The film floats between these moments of distrust, and you don't really know what's happening, and are these characters starting to get on, or what's going? There's just an uneasiness throughout the whole film.
It literally is it's almost reflecting life of real roommates living together. It's two people that don't know each other along and then suddenly getting along. One person's doing all the tasks and chores. One person kind of takes the more slightly alpha position. They both have to try and get along. They have to be in the same room at some points in the day. At some points they're going to have to talk to each other. It's this odd couple kind of situation where they have to kind of get together, but it has those darker turns, obviously, with more to it. And then you've obviously got one of them that just spends all day in his room or the lighthouse whacking off.
And that's the thing, I would say for the first 30 minutes or so, we just see Robert Pattinson's character Ephraim Winslow kind of just going about his duties. He gets he keeps getting I was going to say abused, but it's not the word. He keeps running into this one-eyed seagull, doesn't he?
Oh yeah.
And Defoe's character tells him, bad luck to kill a seabird.
The curse, and you even get it emphasized by how he slaps Pattinson across the face, and they're both but you can see that it's almost Defoe's character, in that moment when he says about the seabirds and you don't do it, it's like he suddenly stops for a moment. He's like reflecting as if there's really bad memories to do with the idea of that curse almost from the seabirds. And also a little bit of like, he then looks down and like looks at his finger almost as if Pattinson's character could like, right, you've just hit me. Like, he like, I guess he could he could properly lay me out now. So I'm going to go into like a kind of like a dog that knows he's done wrong kind of thing, but also a kind of like, there's something in his mind that's obviously playing why that's important.
And then he hits him. He's like, "Cup of coffee. Coffee will sort us out."
Yeah,
but
he doesn't make eye contact.
No,
he's looking down at the table, like, "Yep, that."
But going back to that, the relationship between them is very strange. We get like this kind of master and commander relationship. So one of them is dominant, and the other one's kind of following the lead. And for a large part of the film, Winslow is the one who's getting called a dog, and he's having to do all the jobs and stuff like that. But there's also, I don't know if you picked up on this, but there's also like quite a lot of elements of homoerotica in this.
I mean, there were a couple of points when I thought, I don't know if this film's going to take some kind of odd turn. Or
they're either going to kill or fuck. Like, there's a scene. Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, I
think it's just good. I kind of got to that point because I was like, they're just there all day, and obviously, it's like, what are they to do? They're just like built up, so everything is released on each other.
Yeah.
So it's anger or their fear from life in moments of like drinking and stuff. They like release little details about themselves. So all of these emotions that you normally go through, but have a million different people that you probably see on a daily, or places to go, or freedom to be, is just released on each other again and again and again. So it turns into hatred and anger and violence, and it's all just released. And the time there's a bit of that kind of sexual tension weirdly. Like, it's like, are we about to like the old, like they say that when the seamen are out at sea, what goes on out there stays. They need they need the warm touch of another human being or something. I was like, is this going that place at one point in this film? I'm not sure. It doesn't.
I mean, but it's kind of hard to, talk about it because like you said, the film itself, I mean, we're looking at the plot on Wikipedia just to kind of go through it. But it's hard to kind of pick out the parts, because we get this revelation that, Dafoe's, second, his old wiki died because he lost his sanity, and that he started believing that there was some power to the light and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
I think we get this. I got that feeling very early on. I was like, we know. Like, I feel like there are certain things with this film, with an isolation film, where that's going to happen. Is one of them, like, most likely in my head, it was the Pattinson's character is going to kill the other one.
Yeah, something.
That's what it's kind of building to. So when we get that little drop of the old one died because he had that kind of obsession with the lighthouse, there's no way to not take it as, is this what we're going to see happen to Pattinson's character? Because he's not getting any access. He's told to stay away from it. It's like...
But he also tells him about, he's seeing, he's seeing sea monsters and stuff like that. And by the time this has been revealed, Pattinson has had this... I don't know what... and that's the thing. I don't know if it's a dream. I don't know what it is. Well, it's when he walks into the water, Beautiful shot where...
Oh, yeah, when he's standing
pitch
there.
Black.
The mermaid in the distance.
And the logs and stuff like that. Yeah, and, and he's walking towards the water, and we have the siren blaring again, and the logs, it's
I think
so weird.
The best way of this is, like, so we get a lot of these sequences where... And I think as a whole film, this film, you could literally take it as almost... what could kind of get people is, and again, what could be a slightly divisive thing about it is that by the end, I wouldn't necessarily say you have no idea what was a hallucination, what was a nightmare, who was actually telling the truth in certain moments.
Because both of them seem like unreliable,
and both of them say things against each other when we've seen the other person do it, but then they say that it wasn't. And you're like, is this person so such as when we have the axe scene in Dafoe's character says that Pattinson destroyed the boat and came after him, when we saw Dafoe in a very Shining-esque kind of that waddling move is what I was like, that's Jack Torrance. That's Jack Torrance with his axe kind of coming after you. But then he says, and it's like, is it Dafoe's character when he's come after him with like the axe and stuff and kind of come around, but then he tells Pattinson's character that he was the one that did it. He was
destroyed
the
boat and he chased.
And then any I think any horror fans in this is this a twist? Have we just seen the decline of madness of Pattinson character? And is this going to be what it is? Is that we've actually seen everything from. Quite often we see it much more from Pattinson's character anyway. He is more the protagonist here.
Yeah, so he's
so
it
is like point. It's kind of like, are we seeing it all twisted and actually everything that's been going on? So when Dafoe's character says you've been doing no work and you haven't been doing this and you're missing loads of your chores and stuff, is it actually like when he writes in his book and says that he deserves severance because he hasn't been like working hard
severance with no pay?
With no pay, it is kind of like. So is Dafoe's character just being like a complete twisted like old maniac seadog?
Yeah.
Or is Pattinson's character very quickly, the isolation has kind of driven him mad and everything he thinks is happening isn't happening? And I can tell you right now that really there is no answer to this in this film.
Yeah.
Like it's completely kind of, you can kind of interpret it a certain way. I know later on there's like a slight like explanation that I found that I kind of like, yeah, that kind of sounds about right. But
we'll get to that when
that's
we talk
later.
About theories.
But it's nightmares. So our nightmares. So we see the mermaid.
We see the mermaid
sequence. We also, this is the first in not this one, but we get the water sequence. And at first, that one seems, because he wakes up, that seems like a nightmare when he first sees that water one, because after it, he wakes up straight away and he kind of sputters and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, I guess that was a nightmare sequence then. But the other nightmares of Pattinson character, and throughout the film, he constantly gets these kind of nightmares or flashes or like, and this kind of plays into, this is what kind of plays into that idea of madness as we kind of go through it, is driving him mad kind of thing. Is the whole, like, we see scenes with, again, the mermaid pops up a lot.
Yeah, the mermaid's scrimshaw.
Yeah.
The thing that he finds in the bed with it very early on.
And we have, like, we see, like, the tentacles and crabs crawling, and we see the water and the rocks. But we also get a whole scene where it's kind of, all of this is kind of mashed together. So it's like, we see scenes of his daily chores. He's doing his chores, but spliced into all of that is shots of mermaids, shots of tentacles, shots of the water, shots of...
Yeah.
And it's like as if we're saying day by day, and it's like, again, it's all just, it's really like effective shot that comes in the film when it is just like, is this all like him? What is this? Is this just saying that the daily routine is slowly driving him more into believing this insanity of all these weird... And we also get, in that kind of shot, we get this first shot of the back of the real Ephraim. So Ephraim, who was like, he took his hair, and it like...
You see him in the water with the logs, don't you?
Yeah, and we get Ephraim pops up again like later in the film as well. But he's only in a few like shots of the film, but it all kind of drives you to kind of like the Ephraim character is almost as if Pattinson character is getting closer behind him, like approaching him from behind. But we don't know who it is. It's like, what's going on?
The annoying thing for me is I discovered that because I obviously... We've been talking about the film. So it turns out that Ephraim Winslow was somebody who died whilst Robert Pattinson's character was on a job.
Yeah.
And Robert Pattinson's character is really called Tommy Howard.
Yeah. That's why I got confused by names.
Yeah.
I thought they were both Thomas. So I was like, I can't call them both Thomas. So I went with their last names.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, but actually he's referred to as Ephraim. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watch films with subtitles on anyway, and I found it really fantastic to do that. But I paused it briefly, and on Amazon Prime, if you pause there, it tells you who's in the scene, and it tells you what the actor's name is and what the character's name is. And it said Tommy Howard, and I was like, oh, so there's got to be a twist there.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it kind of Amazon spoiled it for me.
Well, yeah, I had the Thomas Howard thing. Luckily, I didn't really think too much into it. Luckily, I had it down as Thomas Howard, and I had kept missing whenever it was called Ephraim for the first few bits. Because I thought I hadn't heard his name, so I must have missed it. Because they don't mention the name very often, to be fair.
No, he calls him Lad a lot.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I missed it. So I was like, oh, so it didn't. Even though I had it written down that his name was Thomas Howard, I was like, nope, I didn't hear Ephraim. So that's why I was so confused when I was going back through my notes going, who the fuck is who the fuck is Ephraim?
And I think the real tipping point for the film is kind of around the halfway mark. And this is where the madness really cranks up and the characters even start to question it a bit themselves. So just before they go, the cistern, whilst Winslow or, Howard, whatever we're calling him, is going about his duties, he sees a dead gull in there, and it's blooding the water. The water, when he pours it, it comes out. And then the one-eyed gull is there again. And then he brutally kills it, man.
Oh, yeah,
that was brutal. That was kind of
brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that.
I know seagulls can be assholes, but I felt really bad because he'd smashed that seagull's head against the thing 3 times, and the seagull was still making noises.
And then he just carried on.
Yeah, then he just kept going, and the blood splatters across the large. Is it log, or was it? I can't remember what he's laying against. But anyway, we just see the blood continue to splatter out, which is really quite effective because it starts off with nothing, and we get more and more just little bits at a time, kind of growing and growing and growing, and it's fucking hell.
And with a film like this, I think you kind of expect it to ease back a little bit on that.
Yeah,
you expect probably maybe to see him killing it, but to see shots of Robertson doing it, not actually swinging this bird and killing it. But then after that, the wind
straight away you
directions.
see in the whatever we call it, the wind chime, or not wind chime.
What are they called?
I can't think of what it's called.
Thing on the top of the house. I can't.
It's wind something. Anyway, we see that literally. We see it turn. We hear the wind pick up straight away. I think what's important about that, though, that we get to see the whole thing, is that we get to see this unleash of pent up aggression.
Yeah,
and I think it's although we've been pissed off and annoyed and things like that, we haven't seen as much of that yet
because he's still
holding it in,
and he's playing the submissive role.
Yeah, but he also knows that Dafoe is at this point he's in control of his money.
Yeah,
and he's said several times about how he struggled to get a job and things like that.
Yeah,
kind of thing. So it is kind of a big unleashing, as well as the fact that we've started seeing all these weird things that he's seeing.
I forgot to mention before that when. Because we see these very weird, things where Winslow is going about his day and doing the chores, and Dafoe's character isn't there much. He's either sleeping and then he's eating and then he's going to the lighthouse.
Yeah, and he's in charge of the night watch, isn't he?
Yeah.
Of the lighthouse, and the only one. And
Ephraim kind of goes up and sees, and when he peers through, he sees the feet of. Dafoe character.
Well, this is a really disgusting. It's a pretty gross kind of scene because it's how you interpret what you're seeing.
Yeah,
because like you said, you have Robert Pattinson enters and he sees the light and he's looking at it above, but he gets a drop of something on him.
Yeah,
he's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah,
and then that's followed by the sounds of Dafoe, which sounds like a kind of smacking sound.
He's beating it,
he's proper beating it. And then we see the slime of what we assume is, I don't know, jizz or something coming down.
But then we see the tentacle.
But then we see a tentacle, or is it the slime of a tentacle, a Lovecraftian monster or something?
Yeah, and I was thinking, and this is one of the points where I was like, oh fuck, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, shit, man, we need to get off this island. But then obviously the day after, he unfortunately kills the seagull. The winds change on them.
Yeah.
And then a massive storm starts coming again. And they spend the night getting battered, don't they? As they would, because it's their last night. So
it's their last night. And when he says, tomorrow I'm getting off this island. Anytime in any film a character says, tomorrow I'm getting out of here, or tomorrow I'm getting off this, they're not getting out of there.
It's my last day before retirement.
Exactly.
Hit it, man.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
So, it's that's not happening. And the drink, to be fair, drink plays a big role in this.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean when it's kind of is it horror? Is it things like this? Are we seeing them as more dramatic? Because we know with old seadogs and stuff like that at sea, a large amount of them used to go mad. They used to have, at sea, they'd go crazy. And a lot of that was to do with the drink. Because they would just constantly drink, and then the second they run out of drink, they'd all be going cold turkey.
And they go through alcohol withdrawal.
And they would just go fucking mad at each other, or also see syphilis and scurvy. But one of the main ones was the drink, and this definitely takes a big role here because they're pretty much down in hard liquor every night, kind of thing, and stuff that they've just made themselves when they run out, kind of turpentine and honey, I think it is.
That is class.
And they're just there screaming in the middle of the spiral staircase,
and that's the weird thing. We get these moments where you can because where it's like, because I think it's I think it's just before that, but when they're drinking, they go between, especially before the storm, before they I fucked up then, before
Don't matter.
they realize that they're abandoned and that they're not, the relief isn't coming.
Yeah.
When they drink, it's kind of, it's all they share stories, and it's kind of a bonding thing. But when we see them drinking, it becomes very like primal almost. They start dancing and they start like moving around loads and then we'll go from 0 to 100, be really angry and screaming at each other and then laughing and then crying. It's kind of mental, man.
Yeah, unleashing all of that frustrations just come out in the drink. It is weird. And it is hard not to at times think of that withdrawal.
Yeah,
think that they've literally just been going all day and they're fucking grumpy as shit. And the second they start drinking, like even at the table when they're talking, it's not until like they start actually taking like this. First they're like cut, and then once they start taking a drink, it all seems to rev up from there.
Yeah.
So the drink plays a big role in how their emotions are playing, which it probably would. What else have they got to do, to be fair? What else have they got in life? Not only in that time in like history, but also just in the lighthouse thing.
You've literally
got all day long, you'd just either be doing the jobs you got to do, drinking or whacking it.
Yeah.
That's life.
That's like your 3 things you can do.
So, this is one film where people go, oh, like, they don't really need to show me whacking it all the time. And I was like, well, to be fair, what else are they doing?
And I think that is one of the things that comes divisive. Because I researched this. What I do is I watch the film and I go in, knowing as little as possible. I might have said this before, but I don't tend to watch film trailers because I find that they just give too much away. Yeah. So I like to go in fresh and I like to just see what happens. And then I'll watch the film and then I'll do some research about what was going on and how it was received. And a lot of people that I found said that they, quite similar to me, they found this film amazing and they were really enchanted by it, and they took friends to see it, and the friends just were either really indifferent to it or really sorry, we're drinking this tea that tastes like chicken soup, aren't we? Because the milk was off. But they have these moments of they just didn't like the film. Yeah. And I think some of it is because it's a very weird film. I get some people could say it's, it comes off slightly pretentious because we've got a black and white film, we've got it in an old school, aspect ratio, we've got two actors, one kind of a bit of an indie darling these days, Robert Pattinson, although he's making his comeback, but at the time of this, more so indie darling. And then Willem Dafoe's always sound, he's always class.
I mean, yeah, literally, like this film was just.
And I think this is
it's a pirate sounding Willem Dafoe.
Yeah,
I mean.
I think this is probably his best performance for me. But there's not a lot happening. It's not. There isn't massive set pieces. There isn't massive jump scares. There isn't massive things. If you went to see something like The Conjuring, you have a wealth of characters. You often have a soundtrack of the time, and then you often have a soundtrack, and you often have these little sprinklings of, little set pieces to scare people before it all builds up to a massive thing, usually big CGI or something. And this film doesn't have any of that. No. And I think that's one of the things. I don't think this is something that you could stick on at a party. If we had a couple of people, I'm not going to be like, let's watch The Lighthouse, because I don't think people would like it.
There's a lot of people that this is not going to be their kind of film at all. They are just would be completely like, what am I watching? Like, I am bored out of my mind for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing
that wouldn't get it at all.
It's like an hour 40, isn't it? So it's a lot. Yeah, it's not. So it's a lot shorter than I expected it to be, and it's I think compared to something like Midsummer or even The Witch, I think was longer. There isn't a lot of happening, and there's a lot of set pieces. So I think that a lot of the problem that people have is, for me, is they're either not open-minded enough. So particularly within horror, for instance, you get a lot of people who say stuff like, A24 films are just shit, and we'll just hate on them.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking like, okay, like there is more to horror than just like Nightmare on Elm Street
Yeah.
and some films that were made in the 80s. You know, there is a wide thing, and then I think there are just some people, like you said, who will just watch it and think, "What is this? Is this a drama? Is this a thriller? What is this?" Because if you think of thrillers, you think for me, I think of something like I don't know. Silence of the Lambs or Sixth Sense or something like that, you know.
Yeah,
something
got some big twist coming.
Some big twists come in.
You know, got characters interacting. It's, you know,
but there's a lot
more dramatic.
Yeah, dramatic, and there's a lot more cohesiveness within the story.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I mean, I've watched this 2 times. I watched it when I got it, and then I watched it the night after because the whole day I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I just kept speaking like an 1890s sailor.
Like Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, I kept calling my colleagues salty dogs. I kept saying, now is the time for Gab and Chatter and ye. And I think, like, I still don't quite get it because there's this whole thing of what's going on, who is the reliable narrator in this, what the fuck is going on. I get maybe the first 20 minutes up until the first hallucination with the mermaid, maybe that is real, and then it starts going, is what I'm watching what's happening, you know?
Yeah. Is it all a hallucination? Has it gone off ages ago? Is something gone completely crazy at some point? But no, I like completely agree with what you're saying. It's a hard one to lock down. And I even remember, like, something that really pisses me off with these kind of things is, and I said it earlier, it's really hard to pin down what, like, horror is, and that's why I'd say it's hard not to say that this isn't a horror, but I could also understand why some people may say it's not a horror at the same time. But, however, it does really piss me off when it had, I saw some people's, the starts of their reviews saying it, like, although it had been compared to, like, a horror, like, the horror genre, it exceeds like the expectations of that genre. It exceeds what that genre can do.
Yeah, but
and that it really annoys me when they say with the horror genre that it is like a
slog,
one note.
Yeah, that annoys me as well.
Because the thing that annoys me is like if we think of a thriller or a drama or things like that, I would say quite often with thrillers or dramas, we get the case of it's either a really intellectual and well-made thriller or drama, which kind of gives us a thing, or it's something that's been done before and everyone sees it coming and we know, and it's basically falls into it's either really good or really bad, or it's in the middle where it's basically just like a crowd pleaser kind of one.
Yeah.
But there's no kind of thing. Whereas I would say with horror, and I'd even lump comedy into this, they're the two genres that always get neglected.
Oh yeah,
there's no awards barely ever for comedy or horror.
No,
even though I would say it's a lot harder to make a truly good comedy or horror film than it is to make a drama about the true story of someone's life. You know what I mean?
I think to make people laugh is a hard thing to do. You know?
And to make someone truly scared is, I'm not saying any genre like to make someone truly scared. There is a thing with horror, yes, where we can easily make your standard horror film, but I'm talking about a truly great horror film where it's not just scary, but it makes you think and it goes deeper than that.
Yeah.
And it defies what you expect from a horror film. That is not an easy thing to do.
No.
Especially when they find ones that balance where a general audience can enjoy it and a deeper level can enjoy it.
And I don't think, I mean, personally, I don't put too much stake into what reviews say about films.
No.
But we do seem to have this habit. I mean, I'm going to use the latest Halloween Kills as an example because they were reviews for it done by people who clearly haven't watched horror films or don't like horror films. Like I mean, one review literally said the original Halloween was itself a rip-off of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know?
No.
So I think like we shouldn't, ideally, I don't think people who don't like horror shouldn't be reviewing horror, you know?
Yeah, it's the same thing. People that don't get like, yeah, exactly. With any genre, there's certain people that aren't going to like certain ones, and why are you the people that are in charge? I get in a way that everyone's got to have a certain view and an opinion about something, but if you know that you're someone who out and out just hates that genre, then why are you trying to be the one to review it?
Yeah.
I mean, it does feel you're just not going to be the person to understand what the audience that want to read your review are actually going to want
Yeah.
from that film.
I think
So
I'm just going to pop over to the social media suite for a little bit.
Yeah, go on.
I mean, I think you got some on the Instagram, didn't you? But over on Twitter, at CMTH Podcast, we often put up what the film we're going to be talking about is, and then we'll read out some of your thoughts on it. So the only one we had this week on Twitter was at We Needed Roads Podcasts, who you should definitely check out. They release episodes on Fridays. And they're UK based as well, shout out. And they said that the first watch, they didn't really get it, but the second watch, it verges on genius for them. And I could see that. I think this is going to be one of the films that you watch, and I think similar to Midsummer, I think with as these divisive films are, you either have an initial reaction to it where you hate it, you love it, or you're unsure. And I know that's saying like, well, that's the only reactions you can have to a film.
Yeah.
But then on the second watch is when it will really strike and it will really settle in. And that for me, first one, I loved it. Second one, it just solidified it. And I would say like, this is of the more recent horror thriller films, this is probably my favorite. Up there with my one of my favorites. Did we have any on the Instagram at CMTH Podcast?
We did have. We had our friends over at the Horror Project podcast saying that they loved it, and they were surprised by how much they loved this bonkers film.
And they actually released an episode.
They've done an episode on this as well, so go and check them out. They also release their episodes on Fridays.
Yeah.
So go and check out the Horror Project podcast. You can get them on all good streaming services. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this film is pretty. It's extremely quotable. I mean, it's hard not to love pretty much the Willem Dafoe in anything. To be honest. I barely ever don't love the Goblin. I mean, like some of the things like sparkle like a sperm whale's pecker. It's one of the things he says about getting those nails, sucking them off until they sparkle like a sperm. But just the way he goes for it is just like straight away you just totally believe him as this old sea dog.
And even within the language that the characters use, and this was written by Robert Eggers and his brother Max Eggers. I think Max was the one who initially started working on it as he was trying to kind of. I think he was trying to do an adaptation of a unfinished Edgar Allan Poe
one, yeah. So
also called The Lighthouse.
I was going to say I had a look at that about the. That's quite interesting. The Lighthouse, because that was Edgar Allan Poe's final ever piece of writing.
Oh, okay.
And he died before he finished it.
Damn.
So there's actually although they said they were trying to adapt it, there's barely anything to adapt. It's literally it's written from the diary of someone who's new to this kind of position and things like that. So that part kind of plays into this film, obviously, with Robert Pattinson's character. The isolation is kind of there because they start talking about it, but it's in diary form, and there's only actually 4 entries in the diary before Edgar Allan Poe died. Yeah. Okay. So that's how far it got, and it's not long entries. It's literally short paragraphs.
Oh wow!
So there's nothing really to build on from there. So I can kind of see why they said it stalled and stuff like that, because I mean, you haven't got, if you're just trying to purely adapt to that, what do you do? You have to make it up. So they said we have to take it in a completely different direction, but we can use those little kind of tidbits that they've given us as inspiration.
But I mean, it's brilliantly written, like you said. Willem Dafoe has some amazing lines of dialogue, and so does Robert Pattinson. They all do. But for me, there was an amazing thing that I didn't quite notice until my second watch through, and that is the language difference between the two.
Yes.
So Willem Dafoe speaks very old-timey. He says ye a lot and that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that scene.
Love that.
So it's the trouble with ye!
Yeah, the trouble with ye.
Yeah, and then Brad Pattinson comes around and goes, no, trouble with you!
Yeah, the trouble with you.
The trouble with ye!
Yeah, and it's just these simple things of how they say slightly different words shows that the two are worlds apart, and it is these kind of odd bedfellows, and it's so good. The whole where where he's saying about, yeah, you're fond of me, lobster.
I
I've seen
love
it,
that.
And
I love that. I was laughing at that scene.
Creasy.
Like, literally. Oh my god.
And he's almost kind of trying to bargain with Robert Pattinson, and then he just explodes with rage, and he just goes, "Hark,
yeah,
Triton!"
That's what led to my whole, like, I said about the roommate and things like that. That's just literally what put it in my head. It's like, this is like two roommates fighting over, like, you like my food, don't you? You like my food,
yeah.
So why you eat my food? You'll clean my food, like that kind of thing.
And he goes on this explosive rant about how he's got to strike down with the power of Neptune, god of the sea.
Oh yeah.
And it's just this. There was this point where I went from this funny scene because they say what to each other, and I was like laughing a little bit, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't want to fuck with this dude. And the whole time Dafoe is saying it, he's not blinking. He's got his eyes wide open. He looks fucking wild, and you compare that to the first shot of them when they come in, and Dafoe's got a beard and he's got longer hair, but he still looks relatively well kept. And then Patterson's got the little mustache, but as he's gone on, that's looking, bigger. The stubble's growing, and you just see these changes. And then one of the funniest things after is that, like, Dafoe gives this massive rant, and then Pattinson goes, "Okay, I like your food." Just crazy stuff.
Oh, at the end of it, after shouting at each other, that's.
And it's these weird moments that we get in this film, and I can see that why that would be a divisive point, because it almost doesn't follow a straight narrative, of how people would react to each other. Maybe it has a lot. The relationship itself has so many strange layers. Yeah, and there's so many weird stuff that happens.
I think there's a bit of there is a bit that comes down to kind of the hierarchy of who they are and what they've got in this position, and who they are as men, kind of thing. And I think at the same time we've also got what you said about, like, Triton and stuff. There's a lot of Greek mythology-based stuff in this film,
there is.
Of the kind of the gods and the Tritons in there. I think that does play a big part of, like, this film. I was just thinking of well, one thing was that when we were talking about those crazy scenes was just the whole scene where, like, Robert Pattinson's where he's masturbating, but basically sad masturbating, where he, like, bursts into, like, he's in, like, the garage, and that's part of when we get some of those flashes and stuff.
And is that
all
the
different things? Yeah,
he's thinking about fucking the mermaid.
And it's the statue, and it's when he breaks the mermaid statue, but he's just, like, in this sad, like, frustration of he doesn't know where to go. I think this is following after he did attempt to kill Dafoe's character with the blade when he was trying to break into the lighthouse.
Yeah.
And it broke off. The tool he was using broke off and turned almost like knife-like, so he puts it against his throat.
And I think the strange thing is that I'm sure that scrimshaws, which is what they call the little carvings, and they're usually made out of stuff like ivory, I think. But I believe they're supposed to be like a charm for good luck or something like that. Or maybe something to keep themselves busy. But there's definitely some kind of mythology behind it. And I could tell that when he broke it, it just seemed to be like a bad move, It was like breaking a mirror or something like that. Or it felt a bit like when characters are going to do a Ouija board or something, and you're like, you don't do this. It's not going to end well. When he broke it, I was like, fuck you. That feels like he's almost sealing his fate in some strange way. He's broken this symbol of good luck and this weird thing.
Well, no, I know what you mean, because it feels, and this is also when it's followed by that really straight, and I loved this shot. And it does say it on the description here, but who it is. But this is what I'm talking about with the Greek gods and things like that, the Proteus.
Yeah.
I'll explain who Proteus is in a second, but we have that scene where Pattinson has a nightmare. After that kind of is broken, that kind of thing, it seems like something else kind of breaks, and it gets even drearier from that point. And we have a scene where Pattinson sees a lying down body on top of the lighthouse on the, around the top of it, and it turns to be him. And then as he turns around, there's naked Willem Dafoe
just hanging on.
What all the ladies want to see.
Yeah.
And he literally grabs hold on the shoulder, and you get this very Greek god-style shot where the eyes shine down like the eyes of the lighthouse, literally shining directly into Pattinson's eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like as if he's absorbing all of like the knowledge that he has of what he should or should not be doing right now.
Really weird.
But the shot looks so cool.
It looks awesome.
Like Dafoe suddenly goes from like the front looking a bit like more flabby to then suddenly looking a bit more muscular.
Yeah.
And I think like just he looks so different. And so yeah, I think it's probably a good time to say. So one of the main theories that I heard about this film, and one of the things that I believe that Robert Eggers said that a large part of it was a mythology thing, but he didn't want to go into the whole Lovecraftian mythology.
Yeah.
So we don't get, although we mentioned about the tentacled monster stuff, we never get like, it seems like a tease that it's going to go all madness at the end.
But it kind of doesn't, does it?
But it never goes to that point. And we've got this kind of, so what we've kind of got is that like Eggers, same with The Witch, everyone says that one thing he says about both is that they seem like really realistic, well-made period pieces that kind of really play into this world. And and he researches them like really deep into themes, and he likes to kind of rebuild and recraft characters around like real characters or real things like that. And with this one, we've got our sea myths and our legends, which are kind of brought up all the time, like you said earlier, like Triton and the gods of the sea, and they're angry at us. And we've got, with this one, we've got the Greek mythology that I mentioned before kind of playing out. And Proteus, who we just said, and that shot of William Dafoe, like that character, is like a piece of art of Proteus, the god. And Proteus is the god. He was one of myth's first old men of the sea.
Okay.
So he's like a primordial keeper of knowledge and a friend to sea beasts.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so that would probably include being seabirds.
Yeah.
That knew everything there is to know, but hated sharing that knowledge. So he knows everything, but hates sharing it, which is also kind of links again. The character himself, Defoe's character, is very like, he's not talkative about himself that often, unless a lot of drunk has been spooned, and he barely ever reveals anything about himself. He will talk and talk and talk, but he'll talk in riddles and rhyme and sea myths and shanty tales and things like this, which like you could probably listen to Willem Dafoe just stare into your eyes and tell you those sea shanties.
That'd be awesome.
But yes, so he's like this prickly old he's that prickly old shithead that he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's like, so he is almost the embodiment of this Proteus character. And within Greek mythology, because he's like kind of like this Proteus character with all the knowledge, standing at the top of like Mount Olympus, like with all this knowledge within the lighthouse, and not revealing any of it really to Robert Pattinson, who's almost always down below the chores, the thing. He's in charge of keeping everything going, but he never gets to mount that top of that kingdom of God kind of thing. And then we've got so what am I going? So Ephraim, Robert Pattinson's character, as I've written it here, this is where I've thrown in random names. I'm getting myself confused. Like, why is this name here? That's the whole glowing eyes is part of that kind of thing. But it kind of reveals a lot about what the characters are to each other, because Prometheus would be the Ephraim character, or Robert Pattinson character, because he was like a giver, but a trickster of Titan. And Prometheus was famously like, he stole fire from the gods and sparking intelligence, and intelligent life into humanity. And Zeus, noted asshole. Yeah, he ordered Prometheus chained to a rock where eagles would arrive every day to pick out the Titan's organs. Yeah, which, as we'll talk in a second, is a major part that plays in. But it's also about the fact that Proteus would tell him to not go beyond his means. Prometheus, he would say, "Don't go beyond. You don't need to go where you need." That's why he's telling him with the lighthouse and being in the actual lighthouse at the top. Don't go beyond your means. You don't need to go up that mountain of, like Olympus. You don't need to enter that, or else it will mean terrible things for you. Yeah, like the light is mine. Like he says earlier in the film, the light is mine, not yours. You don't need to go up there. You don't need to worry about that. And it's almost as if his last one drove himself mad trying to get the power, like the power of a god kind of thing. So I kind of, when I heard that like kind of theory, I was like, I like that idea. I like the way it kind of plays out. It seems to work with the characters, and it works from where we kind of go, which is Dafoe's character still continuing to keep that from him, even though he's trying harder and harder to get in there. We see Pattinson's character watching it at night.
Yeah.
Like, he'll just stare up at it to see what it is. And we know Dafoe's character is basically like butt naked, just staring into the light. Like, we don't know what they're seeing, though, do we?
No.
We don't see what is happening. We just kind of see, but these two characters playing up against each other, like the all-knowing and the one who knows nothing yet, kind of seem to have quite a nice kind of semblance from where we go towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
Which, well, let's go into the end. Let's kind of talk about the end a little. I think.
Yeah, well, that's when the alcohol runs out. They start drinking turpentine and honey, which was so funny, which was an awesome scene. And the storm worsens and starts flooding the cottage. And that's when Ephraim, Howard, finds the book, the logbook, and that's when it says that he's a drunkard and he's lazy and he should be sacked without pay, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then a scrap happens, and Ephraim, he starts beating the shit out of Wake, doesn't he? Dafoe's character. And as he's beating him, we kind of go between these shots of like the actual
real
Ephraim, the real Ephraim, this kind of small blonde lad, the mermaid that he was seen earlier rutting, and then Dafoe with these tentacles and almost as this monstrous beast kind of character.
He looks like his own kind of mythological beast kind of thing. Like, it's quite cool. He looks awesome. It's Dafoe on full on like screaming mad Dafoe mode. Like, he's awesome. Just like, his eyes are like huge and he's and he's got these weird like parts of his body and like that little almost crown like part sticking out of the top of his head.
It's awesome. It's so weird.
It's such a cool
And then
shot.
he's kind of like Winslow, you're killing me. And then he stops. And then this is where this is kind of weird, and this is where yet again I think more of this kind of homoeroticism and kind of sexual domination almost comes in, because then he beats Dafoe into submission, and then he puts a rope around him and starts making him walk and
like a dog,
woof like a dog, doesn't he? And it's this kind of weird thing.
Yeah,
of
that
power.
was a weird power move. Like, I'm in control now.
I'm in control, and you're going to be submissive to me. And it's just this very strange shift in power. And then he starts burying him alive, and he goes on.
While he's still talking, and it's going in his mouth.
And that must have been so hard to shoot. Fair play to Dafoe, man.
Yeah, that must have been. I wonder, because I know he's very committed, so I do wonder. I wonder whether it was actually mud or whether they made something similar. Like when I've seen like in films they use like Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
But mulch them down into like things, so it's not actually like mud and stuff. You're getting like cookie dust.
Yeah, but then he's eating it.
But it's still better than like eating all the mud. Like,
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it really like it's interesting. It also shows it shows a little bit of the darkness in kind of like Pattinson's character.
Yeah, because we know that he was. I don't know if he was involved in the original Ephraim's death or not.
That's what I got a kind of feeling from, because like I said before, like the first shot we ever get of the real Ephraim was him like as if approaching from behind, kind of thing,
and he was already dead.
And then we get like a strangling, and obviously then he's seeing Ephraim as if he's like strangling or punching or things like that.
Yeah,
and it just kind of made me think like, did he kill Ephraim? So
did he
finish
die,
him off, or did
maybe?
he finish him off so that he could take his life? Because he said how hard it was for someone like him to be able to get any kind of
employment,
with like who he was and what his name was, and for that to get any employment. So it kind of makes you wonder: did you just take someone who you knew could get employment
and then whack him?
Yeah. Well, whack him is death,
as a kid, and whack him off. Yeah. But
but that scene in the grave is so cool.
And yet again, we get another Dafoe monologue where he's actually kind of cursing him and kind of wishing him this Promethean fate, which is obviously to be powerless as the seagulls and as the sea beasts eat his organs. And then we think that Defoe's dead, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then he takes the lantern keys, and then Dafoe comes back in with an axe, which is awesome. I just love the idea of Dafoe
in the kitchen
coming him out.
Yeah. The axe straight into his arm.
Yeah.
Pattinson. This is also why it seems like he's in some kind of mad rage or something.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really react to an axe much in his arm. He's kind of just, son of a bitch. Like, kind of like it kind of just throws it off, and then it's like straight into like smack him down onto the ground.
Take the axe.
And then take that axe, and then Dafoe's gone.
Yeah.
Like a nice blood splatter on his face, I think we get as
goes
into him.
Yeah, big blood splatter. And then he goes to the lantern room and,
climbs those spirals.
Yeah, and the Fresnel lens opens, doesn't it? Which is interesting. And then he starts kind of looking at it, and he starts, screaming and laughing and getting really freaked out by what he's seeing. And it's just a shot of Robert Pattinson covered in blood, brightly lit, as he's laughing and screaming. And it's very strange because you don't...
I mean, it's really weird because it's a very weird scene, and this is definitely one of those ones where it's like you're wondering if you're going to see, and you never do, and you're also thinking in your head like, is this going to be a bit like, is this going to be a big reveal, or is this going to tell us anything? But I mean, I pretty much was expecting this to be like the final shot. To be honest, I was expecting him just to almost the ending to be him looking to the light, because it's that kind of film. I expected just to see like almost he looks into it and that was the end of the film kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he goes through this craziness and we don't know what he's seeing. So some people could interpret it as he's seeing all of these, like we said before, some kind of Lovecraftian world or some other world or some godlike creature or something like that. And then some people could also interpret it as more that this is like he finally got to where he wanted to be and it turns out that it was nothing more than he believed, and this is him just breaking down into madness in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
I was much more for the second one, and also the whole thing I said about the gods and stuff, where but then with the whole thing I said about the gods and stuff, where William Dafoe at one point is even warning him against knowing what he shouldn't know and things like that. I think that's whole like he's got what he asked for, but it's more than his body could even take.
That's what I got.
It's more than he should know.
Yeah, that's my interpretation of it. Is that it's more than he should know, and it's more almost in a very Lovecraftian theme. It's more than he can comprehend.
Yeah,
and that's what causes the breakdown, because he's finally seen it.
Yeah,
and he just can't comprehend it. He can't understand
and it completely just destroys him in his mind, and his mind breaks down, which I think is shown quite nicely by him dropping and literally going down a spiral of madness. Basically, we get a quite brutal scene where he drops and his leg breaks, and he falls backwards down that spiral state, and we just hear every thud as he's going down, and you're almost, again, this is like where I'm almost expecting the end of the film, and I was okay, that's not the end, then it's just going to end on this long, because it pauses on the spiral, and I was like,
that's what
expecting it to cut to black, and then we get an unexpected, like not what I was expecting to see, almost as if Pattinson's character has dragged himself outside with his broken, but all of his clothes and stuff are gone, so his literally naked, and so it's almost as if it's like how would he get into that position, like to be like that with his body and stuff. And we have seagulls literally getting their revenge.
Eating and
having a good scran. His stomach is basically like a layer of skin has been removed because his guts are just open, and he's bleeding and screaming, kind of not like full on screaming, but he's alive while he's being eaten alive, and we see more and more this like hundreds of seagulls coming in the distance as it's getting closer and closer.
And then it just ends, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and it
is that like Promethean fate that I mentioned before. That is like Prometheus getting his guts ripped out in this kind of weird. And those Greek god ones are always weird because they're always in this kind of shot of like violent but beautiful, and weirdly kind of sexual at the same time.
Yeah,
and it's all there kind of thing, and this kind of weird like ending for him.
Yes.
Which, if he did crawl himself out of that house, then he should have stayed dying in the house.
I don't know, man.
But we don't know how he got there. We don't know what happened. But as I said,
we don't know.
It's a really cool shot, and it's the most horrific thing we see in the film.
Yeah,
like that shot of his guts literally being pulled by the seagull out of his stomach, and it's definitely like interesting in that way. And as I said, like for me, I could only take like the only one that's really worked for me is that kind of god explanation that these are the gods that we're playing with kind of thing. It's the only one that kind of makes sense for me, only because I also know that Eggers has mentioned about Greek like mythology in his like interviews and stuff. So it
Yeah.
seems like there's a match there, kind of thing.
Maybe. I
But
still don't kind of know.
it could be, even though he probably has an explanation, no one has explained properly, kind of thing. And they won't, because these films work better when you're just trying to take your own interpretation of it. That I read another one where it was like, because it's the same leg that gets broken, but this one didn't seem nearly as strong, that it's basically that they're both two versions of the same person at different points in time.
I heard that
where
one.
the whole Thomas and Thomas thing comes in, and that
the
same leg that he lost is the same leg that Pattinson breaks, and things like
Yeah.
all these kind of things. Where I was just like, there's loads of theories out there, which is, what a good kind of film like this kind of makes people question everything and what was real.
But yeah, again, I think that is where part of the divisiveness comes from.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't think
people want answers.
People want answers, but not only that, but when you get a twist ending, or you get an ending that's kind of left up to interpretation, you usually get, the rest of the story up to that point is relatively, well paced and cohesive, and what the twist ending is, it make you watch the film and think, okay, what's going to happen for the, what can I think, or what can I figure out what happened by watching the film and piecing together things. It's like the end of Inception, where he spins the thing and it's like, is he asleep or is he not? But the problem with it is that the thing that with the lighthouse that could be divisive is about, after the storm is then, and even slightly before then, we start to lose and we start to question what is happening, and the cohesiveness of the story intentionally kind of goes then. So when it gets to the end, you don't know what's happening. You don't know if this has even happened.
Yeah.
You don't know. And it's hard. And I think because of that whole way in which the story kind of plays out and the lack of cohesiveness, I think that's one of the divisiveness in the films.
Yeah, I think that would definitely, we know that would divide, and that would get rid of a lot of audience just based on that, because people hate not having, people like clean-cut, three-act structure films. Yeah. And when some people don't get that, they really just hate it. And I'd say it's probably a lot more people than most. Like, there's only a certain amount, but probably it's more if you were going like a half and a half of things, it would probably be the lower amount of the ones that like that kind of thing, and more people prefer a clear-cut, straight ending.
Yeah.
This film doesn't give it to you, but it's what kind of makes it more interesting, that you're in this weird hallucinatory fever dream. And this is what the part of the film that makes me, if we didn't have loads of that nightmare sequence and that hallucinatory, then I'd be here saying this is not a horror film.
Yeah.
Even with graphic cuts of someone dying, but people die in other films, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That final shot, yes, is quite a horrific scene, but if it wasn't for this constant, like, not even just the isolation makes it a horror film, but it's that nightmarish, I don't know what's going on, that makes you question psychologically what you know and what the characters know. That's where it falls into our nice psychological kind of horror realm.
Yeah, definitely.
It's got The Shining. It's definitely got The Shining as like that counterpoint of like interesting, slow build kind of films where not a lot really happens, but that doesn't mean it's not entertaining at the same time. And that's why it was so hard for us to kind of describe this film at the same time, because there are so many scenes where it's like, we'd just be describing static shots to you. But that doesn't mean those static shots aren't interesting shots. It's like there's layers to this film that I think you need to see. And I've only seen it once, but I would watch it again to see like more of it. And I could already tell I could find more things, such as our last Divisive film. When I rewatched it again, although I still thought Midsommar was a fairly good film, I felt like I'd still taken much of what I'd kind of decided on it. I felt like I still kind of saw where it was. It was a bit more obvious in some ways, whereas this film is much more. I think the ambiguity is done much better in this film than I felt that it was. Where Midsommar felt a bit more like it was trying to be like, oh, isn't that clever? And I was like, well, I'm kind of questioning on that, because I don't think it is as clever. That's where it kind of split me. Whereas, like when we said earlier, pretentious with this film, but I don't feel like it is, because I feel like it's not trying to be. It's not trying to be more than it is. It's trying to tell a simple tale it's not trying to be like a layer on a layer. Like it's not trying to subvert expectations. I don't think really.
Well, I think pretentiousness is a strange thing.
It is, yeah.
I mean, he's made a film that's kind of like a 1930s, 1940s film. Like some people would say that's pretentious, but
because it's going back and
it's a stylistic choice.
But it's a style, yeah.
Not every film is going to be exactly the same.
No,
not every film should be exactly the same.
Yeah, and as we said with A24, we said it with Ari Aster. We said that it's a case of like we're getting like more like auteurs.
Yeah,
here where it's people with a singular vision. It's their ideas. It's their most of the time. It's their written by, directed by.
Yeah,
everything. They're involved in every stage of it. It's purely their ideas.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to say that it's not what they kind of wanted, but that doesn't always mean it works perfectly. But I'd say, Eggers has done a pretty solid job.
Yeah,
here.
I love this.
He's done a pretty, and the casting choices are very well made.
Yeah.
They work perfectly balanced off of each other. And Pattinson did a good job. If this is what got him, I understand why he got it off of this, because he's got a deep broodingness about him that I'm sure will work. And for some people, I'm sure that will make him more excited for where he's going next, kind of thing. Hopefully.
Yeah. Have you got anything else to add?
No, I think I'm done with The Lighthouse for now.
No, beautiful. So I guess we are going to leave the island now. Our shift at the lighthouse is over. Now is the time for Gab and Chatter. And as always, if you've enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. You can find us, let us know your thoughts on The Lighthouse, if it's a divisive film for you, if you love it, if you hate it. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at CMTH Podcast, and we will see you next week for another episode. Goodbye.